Hi, I'm Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me in making this fun marigold pendant. Remember, if you need any materials, check out the links below me to order from us online at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. So to begin, we're going to grab our candy beads, and these are the 8mm candy beads that we are using. I want you to use some .006 wildfire beading thread and a size 12 needle. String on about 4 feet of thread, a candy bead, followed by an 8/0 seed bead. I'm using Miyuki Duracoat Galvanized Gold and the Opaque Orange in the candy bead. Go ahead and string on 9 of those candy beads with an 8/0 seed bead after each. Bringing it down towards the bottom of the thread, making sure that all your candy beads are facing the same direction, flat on one side, and the puffy side facing up. I'm going to tie this into a loop. Right over left, left over right, making a nice knot to create the loop that the cabochon or the crystal is going to sit inside of. Knowing that you ended with an 8/0 seed bead, I want you to string your needle and thread through the next candy bead, the next 8/0 seed bead, and the second candy bead. This is going to work to hold it together a little bit better, and as a security, I usually don't like to do what we're going to do next, called a step up near the knot. We're going to take our thread and needle now, coming out through that bottom candy bead, and we're going to step up to the top hole of that same candy bead. The thread is going to exit the top hole in the opposite direction than what we were originally going, exposing a tiny bit of thread on that exterior line. From here, we're going to add in 9 nib-bits that are going to sit between our candy beads. If you're unfamiliar with the nib-bits, they look like a little corn kernel having 2 holes, one around the smaller section of the V and one towards the larger. We're going to add in a nib-bit between each one of our candy beads, adding first a 15/0 seed bead, and I'm using the Miyuki brand Duracoat Galvanized Champagne, followed by this jet bronze nib-bit, and then another 15/0 seed bead, again going through that smaller hole of the nib-bit bead. Go ahead around in the circle now, catching on to that second hole of the candy bead and adding in a nib-bit between each one of our candy beads. We're going to add in those 9 nib-bits and then come back and step up again from that bottom hole of the nib-bit towards the top hole of the nib-bit. As you're adding in the last of your nib-bit beads, you have on your 15 nib-bit 15 sewing into that first candy bead that your thread was originally coming out of. Again, I want you to sew through the first 15 and then that first nib-bit that you just added in that grouping of 9. Go ahead then and step up from that bottom hole of the nib-bit toward the top hole of the nib-bit. From there, we're going to start bending our nib-bits back to create our nice bezel. To do so, we're going to do a series of 2 15s and 11, and then 1 8/0 seed bead, and then downgrade. So we're doing 2 15s on our thread and needle, 2 11s, then 1 8/0 seed bead, 2 11s, and 2 15s onto our needle. From there, we're going to go from one nib-bit right over to the next, catching on the second hole of all the nib-bits. It's going to sit a little bit kind of lacy, and they're going to sit zigzagging up and down. Don't worry about that as you go around and add this grouping of 9 seed bead collections in. We will eventually bend them towards the back in order to link and bend our nib-bit so we just see the top of the nib-bit, that point towards the top of the actual pendant. As you add in your last of that grouping of seed beads, you're going to sew back in through that first nib-bit that your thread was coming out of. And again, we're going to do kind of that stepping up to add into this netting design and hold our fancy 27mm Crystal AB stone into the back. I'm going to step up and sew through those first 2 15/0 seed beads that I added, the 11/0, and out the 8/0 seed beads of this little bit of netting that I added along the front here, catching on that second hole of the nib-bits. You can see it kind of wants to wave all around. We are going to bring it towards the back, and which is going to sit those nib-bits facing up, so that way you only see kind of the tip of them. From here, we're going to go along the back and add in seed beads to connect along the back edge. I want you to add a 15 in, then an 11, then another 8, another 11, and another 15. As you have those on your needle and thread, go ahead and pick up the next 8-0 seed bead in line from that first round and string of beads along the front. That's going to pull that nib-bit towards the top and pull the seed beads towards the back that you just added in. As you go along, adding in again 15 to 11 to 8 and then back down in the seed beads, you're going to sew in, skipping over the nib-bit to the next grouping of seed bead lines. As you pull that in, you're going to need to, while you get to about the 4th or 5th of your addition here, you're going to want to grab your 27mm fancy stone and pull that and put that in the netting here, so that way it acts to hold it in place. So you're going to grab your stone, set it right inside so it sits right on top of the candy beads, and right now we're sitting, as we pull the nib-bits towards the back, with the flat side of the candy bead facing up. So you can see I'm now holding the crystal in place, and I've added in my last grouping of seed beads, and I've sewn back through that 8-0 seed bead and also back through the first 15, 11, and 8. I'm going to give a nice little tight pull to pull those nib-bits in and the netting in. And we're going to go around and basically do one more series of netting in order to hold these in place before we come back around to the front side and decorate the interior with a group of crystals. Giving it a nice tight pull there, we're going to go around, and to do the final kind of catch and version of this, we are going to pull again those nib-bits in towards the center, and we're going to run some seed beads along this inner row to finish it up. Coming out of one of the 8-0s that sits directly below one of the candy beads in the middle of the nib-bits, we're going to skip over 2 nib-bits, and we're going to go over to that connector that sits basically over right after that next candy bead. So you're skipping over kind of 2 nib-bits, going to that next connector, and we're going to make a little square along the back with seed beads to hold the Rivoli in place. Upon exiting one of the 8-0 seed beads that sits from that V, sitting right on top of the candy bead, I want you to add 5 more of your 11-0 seed beads, and then you're going to go over to that next 8-0. So we just connected to those same 8-0 seed beads. We're going to go around one more time, connecting to that same group, just kind of pulling those seed beads in towards the center. Again, 5 more 11s. Skipping over the 8-0 below the nib-bit and sewing into the 8-0 on that original V of the netting. Making sure these seed beads, which we're going to sew all the way through as our final go around the back here, are all facing inward with the 8-0 sitting right on top. This also, if you want the nib-bits to show, you can do this as the front of the Rivoli as well. So instead of having it in the back, if you like the look of the back design, and my suggestion if you do that is to change the 8-0s for 2mm crystals. Pull those all towards the back, making sure that they sit towards the interior. You're going to repeat this obviously 9 times as we go around the loop. And then as our final action along the back here, we're going to sew back through all of those 5 seed beads along the scalloped edge. So after you add in those last of those 5 seed beads, you're coming out one of your 8-0 seed beads, and what you're going to do is literally sew from one grouping of 5 right over to the next grouping of 5. So we're not going through any 8-0 seed beads. You're just going to have that nice edge here where it pulls those seed beads towards the middle and catches in the Rivoli nice and tightly. Again, if you do want this to be the front, flip your Rivoli around, or your fancy stone rather, and have it face towards the front. So again, going around here, you're catching on to all 45 of those seed beads, not sewing through any of the 8-0 seed beads. After each group of 5 seed beads that you sew through, make sure that you're pulling the thread rather than the needle to tighten up and bring those seed beads towards the back of the project. After we're done along the back of the piece, going through all 5 of the seed beads the whole way around, you're going to go through your 1/8 seed bead that's next after exiting one of those groups of 5. And we are going to get back to the front of the project. So everything we just did to get towards the interior of the back, think about the fact that you're sewing through to get to the front, going back through all those steps. So I'm going back through the 8/0, back through 2 11s, 2 15s, back through the first hole of one of these nib-bits through the larger side. Once you're back through that first hole, flip it over towards the front, so now you're seeing that front of the design, and go back through the small hole of that nib-bit bead. From here, we're going to concentrate on the front of the piece and adding in some crystals, going now through that first 15 after the nib-bit, as well as the first candy bead. Downgrading, I want you to sew through that first hole or the interior hole of the candy bead and out. That's going to again expose a little bit of thread. You really won't see any of it. Going through here, we're going to catch on to our 8/0 seed beads that sit between the candy beads. We're going to add in a nice scalloped design, adding in some of the crystals along the front with a series again of going from smallest to biggest. So we're going with a 15, then an 11/0 seed bead, then one of our 2mm crystals, 11 and 15. Once you have those 5 beads on there, you're going to sew from 1/8 seed bead to the next along the design. Make sure with your fingers just to push those towards the interior so they sit on the inside of the candy bead as you work your way around, adding these into the whole interior row, which is going to again end up with 9 groups of these 5 seed beads, or rather these 5 beads, the 2 15s and 11s and the crystal in the middle. The last thing to do as you're going around and adding in your last grouping of seed beads and crystals is to sew through the final 8/0 and then also sew through the 15, the 11, and come out through the first crystal that you added. You're going to add one more crystal as you go around and complete the netting of going and adding into the crystal that you just added in that V that sits in front of the candy bead. Add a crystal, sew through the crystal. Add a crystal, sew through the crystal. So you're adding in 9 new crystals, sewing through those 9 that you just added. The stop bead, or the stop tail rather, that's kind of in the way, just push out of the way for now. Even if it's laying in front of the crystal, doesn't matter. We'll go back and we will go into and burn that down. So go ahead and add that inner row of nice sparkly crystals. If you'd rather have more of a gold look rather than so much crystal, you can add in 2 of your 15/0 seed beads in place of the crystal bead as well. So you're going around here adding these in to add that nice bling to the middle and get kind of that center of a marigold look. Coming around the edge then here, I'm adding in my last of my crystals and giving a nice tight pull, going through again this first crystal that I just added in that grouping of 9, as well as the second crystal there in place. Again, a nice tight pull, making sure that you don't see any thread as you see that center of the marigold. You can see the nib-bits just kind of add to that exterior look, and we're going to go around and connect and add a little bit more bling on the outer edge as we go along to get our bail finished. To do so, and to get to that outer edge, I want you to take your thread and needle, downgrade just like we did from the back to the front when we were getting there. Go through the 11 and the 15, as well as the 8/0 seed bead underneath it. From here, go through your candy bead and out. And again, from the bottom hole or the interior hole of the candy bead to the exterior hole of that same candy bead. Go through the 15 and the nib-bit and out. And one more time downgrading from the pointed hole of the nib-bit towards that exterior hole along the outer edge. When you're coming out along the outer edge, I want you to come out through the nib-bit, and at the same time you are going to catch in to that first 15-0 that sits by it. Make sure your thread and needle your thread doesn't catch on any of the seed beads beside the nib-bit. And you're going to go here to connect and add in some extra little crystals along that outer edge, connecting in the 15 nib-bit 15 from each of this outer row. Sewing along the outer row, as you can see here, you're coming out that 15 of the nib-bit, you add an 11, a crystal, an 11, sew into that next 15 nib-bit 15. And if you need, you can kind of turn it to the side and sew through the needle, or sew through the nib-bit, and then go back through and sew through the 15. What this does is it gives a little bit of that nice crystal pop along that outer edge here, as well as holds the nib-bits all in a nice line. So when you're looking at it, you have that nice little bright crystal sitting on the exterior of the candy bead. You're going to go ahead, obviously, and do this 9 times. And on the last time around, we'll go ahead and add in our bail to our pendant. Keep in mind, if you would want to put a tassel or anything along the bottom, you would do that as well as you're going around here creating a little V or so and adding your tassel in. You can check some of our other YouTube videos, as well as comment what you would add to the bottom of this marigold pendant, maybe perhaps a couple leaves or something. And you can check out some of the videos that Teresa has done on the tassel covers and the tassel caps if you would want to add a nice little tassel to the bottom of this marigold pendant. Coming up to one of the sections here along the top, I'm about halfway along adding in my crystals. I only have 3 more to go, but I'm going to take this opportunity to do one of my actual bails. So you're going to kind of repeat what we've been doing here. 2 15s, 2 of your 11-0 seed beads, gather 1 more of your crystals, and come on out. That's going to sit in a nice V on top of that nib-bit there. If you want to, you can either add a loop, you can do a soldered ring, you can get a wire guard to make an actual loop here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it nice and simple, and I'm just going to use my crystals actually to make my loop. So I have a gathering here of my crystals, and I'm going to use 6 crystals in case I want to put it on a pendant or a cord. And you're going to string onto your needle and thread those 6 crystals, run back through that 1 crystal that your thread was coming out of, and that loops up that grouping of crystals. If you know you need a little bit more space, you can use more crystals in that loop. Add in 2 of your 11-0 seed beads, 2 of your 15-0 seed beads, and back through that same 15 nib-bit 15 out to the exterior side. Go ahead then and continue along the design, adding in that 11 end crystal until the very bottom. Once you're done there, you're just going to take your thread and needle, knot your thread towards the back of the project, and burn down that original starter thread with your thread burner, cord cutter, and get that nice design and the marigold really kind of sitting right there along the top in that beautiful floral design. Thanks so much for joining me in making this marigold pendant. There are always questions that people want to know what beads they can swap out. Make sure to check out my Better Beader episode on what beads you can switch out for which in the 2 different sizes and shapes, as well as check out the links below to shop with us online at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. Remember to please comment below and let us know any switches that you made, questions you might have, or suggestions. We're always up to build the community and make you better beater. Keep in mind also, if you want to, click that little button in the corner to subscribe to get regular updates from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching, happy spring, and enjoy your marigold pendant.